Hello, Americans. Welcome to the Pat Donovan Show here on this Friday, October the 7th. You know, 2012 is an election year, and it's very important for our country that you are involved. And I've decided that I will be involved in 2012 as I've decided to run for office. And I am asking for your vote. I am not, however, running for the office of President of the United States of America, as I am not nearly crazy enough or smart enough or a lot of things enough to run a country. So I will not be throwing my hat into the ring for the 2012 presidential nomination. However, again, Americans, tampons, that's what they say, right? Tampons. And especially you Rays fans, I need your vote. I need your vote as I've decided to run for office, and I would like you to get on with the campaign. Pat Donovan for pregame and postgame host in 2012 for Tampa Bay Rays Radio. It's got a ring to it, doesn't it? I certainly think so. Good afternoon. Welcome to the show. Starting out a little bit silly, but dead serious. Dead serious. Word came across today that apparently Rich Herrera has decided to move on to greener pastures and pursue other opportunities in sports broadcasting. So as I wish Rich Herrera well in his new role, in his new opportunities, I come to you, Tampa Bay, telling you that I would like a new role. And certainly don't want to go anywhere as far as Tampa Live Sports is concerned. I will continue to be part of your home for live streaming sports in Tampa Bay. But my love and passion for the Rays has been here for years. I wish I remembered the rest of that LL Cool J line from Mama Said Knock You Out. Something about suckers and fear, but I don't want to put anybody in fear. All I want to do is talk Rays baseball each and every day with the fans of Tampa Bay, prior to and after every game. And I know a little sprinkling in between, too, with the great Rays broadcast team. So I'm throwing my hat in the ring, and I'm asking for your vote. You know, I look at it, and the Rays on the field have gotten younger and more exciting. So why not do that in the broadcast booth as well? That's my pitch. That's my spiel. And I hope that you will give me your vote in 2012. Unfortunately, the Rays season is over, ended a couple days ago. And now the question going into 2012 is not just who will be your pre- and post-game host on Tampa Bay Rays Radio, but there's some questions about some of the roster and who's going to be back in that starting rotation. Do we have a guy like Matt Moore start in the minor leagues, as we've seen some other Rays players do during their rookie years? And I don't buy that it's all about payroll and arbitration. And remember, that was the talk when Evan Longoria was sent down as a rookie, that it was all about his arbitration numbers. And it had nothing to do with him needing some seasoning in the minor leagues. And then the Rays turned around and signed him to a long-term deal and kind of made that whole point moot. So I don't think it's that. But I think Matt Moore has shown that he belongs in this rotation. I think that because we understand the Rays situation as a small market team and the way that they have to build their roster, that they can't always hold on to guys that are near the end of their run, guys that are going to be free agents. So when you look at that pitching staff, I think the obvious question is, what can you get for James Shields or for one of those other pitchers in the starting rotation? But I think when you look at the guy they're going to be able to control for the least amount of time, that's usually the guy you consider moving. But a lot of questions about the 2012 Rays, and they'll be answered over this offseason. I know the biggest one, some speculation lately, is will the Houston Astros or will the Chicago Cubs, who we know have already asked to speak to the Red Sox, Theo Epstein, will one of those two teams try to come after Andrew Friedman? And, you know, I know when I talk about building this roster and the way that the Rays have to do it, that there's one guy I have a whole lot of faith in doing just that. And that's the guy in place. That's the guy in place. I don't want to have to look for another GM. I don't know that there's a lot of people. Who can massage a small market payroll the way that Andrew Friedman and the rest of that Rays front office has been able to do. I don't think there's many people at all that can pull that off. And we've got some evidence of that. The Oakland A's stay competitive for the most part. But I don't think you can say that they've been able to do quite as much as the Rays have been able to do. You know, 3 playoff appearances in 4 years, pretty good in most divisions. In the American League East, I think it's special. It's that hard to make a playoff run in the American League East that whether you're the New York Yankees, the Boston Red Sox, the Tampa Bay Rays, the Blue Jays or Orioles, regardless of which one of those teams you are, it's a pretty special thing to do 3 out of 4 years. But I'll say this. It's a whole lot less special when you're spending $200 million to get it done. I'd have a lot more respect for the Baltimore Orioles, who, by the way, I think we all owe a whole lot of respect to after the way they finished the season against the Boston Red Sox, helping propel the Rays into the playoffs. But I'd have a whole lot more respect for the Baltimore Orioles or the Toronto Blue Jays getting it done in the American League East than I do the Boston Red Sox. And I know I quoted this once before, and I don't remember where I heard it, but I remember hearing a radio caller lately that basically said, when he talks to his friends that's a Yankee fan, he says, you basically get to handpick your entire lineup before we get any players. And I know it doesn't exactly work that way, but that's a pretty damn good analogy there. Because face it, they have their choice. They can just walk in and snatch up just about any player you want. And it makes it tough to compete with teams like those. And for the Rays to have done it the way they've done it the last 3 out of 4 years, and even the year they didn't make the playoffs, for them to be where they are right now is pretty impressive. And I honestly believe if they make a couple of moves, this is a team that should be a favorite for the World Series next year. Not to be a playoff team, but for the World Series. But they've got to do a couple of things right. And they've got to bring in a couple of veteran bats. They just can't expect this exact same lineup to go out there and get it done. I just don't believe they can do that. I know we got into the playoffs this year. But again, come playoff time, we saw exactly what has bitten this team throughout the season. And that's they throw up a bunch of runs one night, and then they struggle for the rest of the series offensively. And with Evan Longoria continuing to progress, I think progression is one of the things that people, I don't know if it's that they don't talk about it enough or they don't consider it enough. But as constituted, I think this is a better baseball team. If they don't do anything, if they go, and obviously they will not, but if they roll out there with the same 25 guys on opening day this year as they had towards the end of the season, I think they're still a better baseball team. Just because Evan Longoria is continuing to progress and Desmond Jennings is continuing to progress and the entire pitching staff. When you have young players that are in that range where they're on the verge of greatness, you never know when they take that next step and become a dominant player. And as good as David Price is, he hasn't yet been consistently dominant. As good as that young pitching staff is, they haven't been consistently dominant. That's why, as much as I think they're the best pitching staff in the American League, the experience of the Philadelphia Phillies pitching staff is what makes them the best pitching staff in baseball. But don't think if the Rays can keep David Price, Jeremy Hellickson, and Matt Moore together for a while, that they won't be consistently dominant the way that Phillies staff is. But that said, just being better in 2012 than they are in 2011, and I believe most of those guys will be, because progression happens with great baseball players, and that's what a lot of these guys, I don't know about great, but certainly very good baseball players. It's why I still have some hope in a guy like Sean Rodriguez. I feel like he's just right there on the edge from going from an exciting kid to one of the better second basemen in baseball, or maybe shortstops. Maybe they leave him at short. He did a good job at short. But I think he can be one of the better middle infielders in the game if he just starts to hit a little bit better. But defensively, he's almost there. But they've got to find a way to get a couple more veteran bats in here. And I've talked about it on the show before. I truly believe they've got a great opportunity to do that. Whether it's James Shields, whether it's a Jeff Neiman, whether it's a Wade Davis, I think we obviously know it's not going to be Matt Moore, it's not going to be Jeremy Hellickson, and it's not going to be David Price. But I don't know that you can go out there and run out 6 guys next season again. So unless they plan to send Matt Moore down for a little while and use him as insurance, because it's tough for a pitcher to get through an entire season without missing any time at all. And we've certainly seen with Wade Davis and with Jeff Neiman that, those guys have a tough time with their shoulder from time to time, and you do have to worry about if they can get through an entire season without an injury. So maybe the Rays look at it as insurance and keep 6 guys around. But I think I wouldn't be opposed to that if this team was offensively sound, but it's not. You've got to get some offense in here, and I think one of the ways you can do that is trading one of those starting pitchers. And obviously, it's not as easy as saying, okay, James Shields will get you the best package, so you trade him. Or maybe Wade Davis has the most upside out of the 3, according to some, so he'll get you the best pack. Whatever it is, and it doesn't necessarily mean you take the best package, because you're still giving up something in that trade. But you look at your options on what kind of packages you could pick up for each player, and you pull the trigger on the best deal. You get a veteran bat, or at least a prospect, an offensive prospect that's about as close to a can't miss as you can get for one of those guys. and you bring in some bats. And I know I've probably quoted this article too many times, but I just think it's a great point that the Sports Illustrated did a poll asking about, I think it was 200 to 300 Major League Baseball players, what managers they'd most like to play for in baseball. And as I mentioned before, I'm sure that wasn't a poll of 200 to 300 rookie baseball players or young baseball players. I'm assuming when Sports Illustrated goes out and does something like that to get the best data, they go for the veterans. And out of that group of players, the one manager they wanted to play for most was Joe Madden. And they were good baseball players. It took forever for Vladimir Guerrero to sign this past offseason. And there are going to be, I'm assuming, some pretty good veteran bats. I'm not talking about 340 hitters. I'm not talking about 60 home runs. But good veteran bats that could solidify this lineup and add to this youth. And by the way, Johnny Damon's one of those guys. He is not a Tampa Bay Ray as of today. He is a free agent. But I fully expect if the organization wants him back for Johnny to be back. I can't imagine the Rays not wanting Johnny Damon back. So as much as he's a free agent, I look at him and I say, I'll be shocked if Johnny Damon is not a Tampa Bay Ray in 2012. If he's not a member of the Rays in 2012, I will really be shocked. But I think there's a couple other guys out there like a Johnny Damon. A couple other guys that are pros, that can hit the ball, that can teach some of these other hitters patience, but not too much patience. You know, I was talking to my guy J Mac yesterday, and he said, I won't miss B.J. Upton because I'm tired of looking at him. I'm tired of looking at him looking at third strikes. Now, personally, I disagree with him about B.J. If he is gone, whether it's this season or in the future, I'm going to miss B.J. quite a bit as a kid and as a baseball player. So I just think this team's got to get some veteran bats, and I think out of those guys, out of that group of guys who say, I want to play for Joe Madden, I want to live in paradise, I want to play for the Tampa Bay Rays, I think there are guys out there that will take less money for an opportunity to live in paradise, play for Joe Madden, and play for a World Series title. Because with a couple of veteran bats, there is no reason why this team shouldn't be a favorite. When they can do what they just did, when they can win 91 games with a team that was shut out, what was it, 50, somewhere between 15 and 17 times, what can they do with a roster that consistently scores runs? And a better Evan Longoria, and a better David Price. Because as much as I expect progression from all the young kids, those are two guys that maybe don't need to progress that much, but in my opinion, did not play to their best this season. I know Longoria had a great home stretch, but I don't expect him to hit 240 in 2012. And I don't expect David Price to have the record or the ERA that he did in 2012. So a better David Price, a better Evan Longoria, and a couple of veteran bats. And where's this team? I think they're a favorite. I think they're a favorite to go to the World Series because of that pitching and because of the youth on this roster. I think it's still, despite the disappointment of being ousted in the first round of the playoffs, an exciting time to be a Rays fan. It's an exciting time. And hopefully I can talk a lot more Rays baseball with you next year because my hat's in the ring. I would like your vote. Pat Donovan for pre- and post-game 2012. I'm going to take a quick break. I'm going to tell you some things I'm still excited about the 2011 Major League Baseball playoffs, including the Yankees are dead, huh? All that payroll, and as some guy said, one more home game than the Tampa Bay Rays in 2011. knocked out in the first round of the playoffs last night by the Detroit Tigers. I'll talk about why I would love to see the Tigers win a World Series, considering the Rays are done, and some other things that do excite me about that end of that series and what we're looking forward to in Major League Baseball. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back. It's your home for live streaming sports in Tampa Bay, TLSTV.com.
Escapes the tackler, gets pushed out of bounds, but
deep, and it's intercepted in the end zone by Robert Davis, and Nelson Aguilar will walk in again with another Berkeley Prep touchdown.
To open, and another ace to the same position.
escapes the tackler, gets pushed out of bounds, but
deep, and it's intercepted in the end zone by Robert Davis, and Nelson Aguilar will walk in again with another Berkeley Prep touchdown.
To open, and another ace to the same position.
escapes the tackler, gets pushed out of bounds, but
Deep, and it's intercepted in the end zone by Robert Davis, and Nelson Aguilar will walk in again with another Berkeley Prep touchdown. All right, welcome back. Pat Donovan Show here on TampaLiveSports.com. Tiger Woods, another tough day yesterday, huh? You feeling bad for him yet? I'm not. I'm not at all. I think it's hilarious, actually. I think it almost serves the state of golf for relying so heavily on him for so long. So I don't feel that bad for golf either. You know, they've got some exciting young players on the tour. And until we found out how much of a knucklehead Tiger is, they didn't bother promoting them. They just let Tiger be their bell cow. They just assumed he was as clean cut as they thought he was. Then we found out he's a freak. So PGA kind of getting what they deserve a little bit. And Tiger certainly as well. I love things that make me believe in karma a little bit. Like Tiger struggling. Like the Philadelphia Eagles struggling. Makes me think maybe there is some karma. Anyways, a Tiger I like to root for a little bit, the Detroit Tigers. Certainly rooting for them in this series against the New York Yankees, as much of a bummer as it is to see the Rays lose in the first round of the playoffs. To know that the Yankees did the same and will not be in the World Series is absolutely fantastic. And tonight, 8:37, the St. Louis Cardinals have an opportunity to knock out Philadelphia. And Philadelphia is one of those teams that, on the one hand, I want to hate them just because they're Philadelphia. On the other hand, that pitching staff is so impressive and likable. They don't got guys that you want to root against necessarily, you know? They're guys that you just go, I don't want to root for that guy. I can't root for that guy. And I can't root for any of the Phillies because they're in Philadelphia, for crying out loud. But a likable staff and an amazing staff and one of the best possibly of all time, and certainly the best, I think, of my lifetime. Although I think this Rays staff moving forward has a heck of an opportunity with David Price and Hellickson and Matt Moore. But I would love to see St. Louis win tonight. If St. Louis wins, Philadelphia and the Yankees both out, it means I really will not be devastated regardless of who wins the World Series. I'd like to see it be somebody we haven't seen ever in the case of some teams, or at least lately in the case of others. I'd love to see Detroit win, though. I would love to see the Detroit Tigers win. And there's a bunch of reasons, and first and foremost is the city of Detroit. I talked a little bit yesterday about the economy, and certainly Tampa Bay is hard hit as just about any city in the country, except for, I think you can argue, Detroit. I think Detroit has been hit as hard, if not hardest, and maybe it's just that we hear about it the most because of the automobile industry coming out of Detroit. But that's a city that could just really, really use something to root for. And it's exciting to see for them. I certainly am not a Detroit Lions fan either, but for them, it's exciting to see the Lions doing well. And it's exciting to see the Tigers on the verge of another World Series. And I just think it would be incredible for that city at this time, when they're struggling as badly as they are, to see the kind of boost that it would give the economy for more baseball and championship baseball to be played there, and just the spirits of that city. I think when you're an American, you root for other cities that are doing poorly. Any of them. If New York ended up in the situation Detroit's in, I'd root for New York just the same. Maybe not just the same. It's different when they're in your division. So, certainly not. But you feel good for a city when they need it as badly as Detroit needs it, and they get it done. I'd also feel particularly happy for Jim Leland to get another one. And I don't know if it was yesterday, but lately I talked about my excitement the first time I went into the Detroit Tigers manager's office after a game when I was covering Detroit for somebody up there. And Jim Leland, again, was just sitting at his desk. The most awful piece of steak I think I've ever seen. He's cutting up on his plate. And there's a cigarette in the ashtray, and he just kind of doesn't even look up at us. As he's cutting his steak, he just says, "Questions?" And I was like a little kid. I'm not starstruck very often by athletes anymore, or coaches or managers, or, I tell people all the time, there's one guy left that I'm going to be completely starstruck when I meet him, and that's Magic Johnson. But there aren't many guys, that I kind of go, whoa. But that was kind of the feeling with Jim Leland, not even looking up to talk to. It's kind of, the grizzled old vet guy. It was just kind of what you expect from Jimmy Leland. And it was cool to be there and see that while covering that team. And I also think that it would be great to see him win another World Series. And to see Jim Leland possibly go out on top. I mean, I certainly had an opportunity to ask the man. And I don't know if it's been asked much in Detroit this year. But he's a little long in the tooth. And you have to wonder if Detroit pulled it off, if they won the World Series, if he'd walk away on top. And that'd be cool to see. And whether he walks away or not, if the Rays don't have a chance to win, which obviously at this point they do not, love to see Jim Leland get another one. And there's another guy in that series that deep down I want to root for. I believe strongly in redemption. I believe there's a line you can cross where you cannot redeem yourself anymore. And I've talked about the athletes I believe who have crossed that line. But, there's guys that, in my opinion, Cam Newton is a great example, where I just think they were immature and young and a knucklehead. And I know stealing somebody's laptop's pretty crappy, But I don't know that it makes Cam Newton an awful person. And I know, what are the other speculations about Cam Newton? He cheated in college. Who the heck hasn't cheated in college? I mean, seriously. And I'm not talking about the money. I'm talking about, in Florida, he cheated on some tests or something, allegedly. Right? I don't know the whole story. But come on. Doesn't mean he's a terrible person. And you know how broken I think the whole college system is, so I never think any kid taking money is a sign that they're a terrible person. Because that system's so damn broken. And as I always tell people, whenever a system is that broken, I'm not surprised when the rules within the system are broken. I'm not. Look at Miami. They had a freaking lobby named after the schmuck who was giving out illegal benefits. Okay? But it's the kid's fault for taking it? Come on. Give me a break. So I believe in redemption. I believe that it's a great thing right now what Cam Newton's doing in the NFL. Showing people that thought that he wasn't very smart or he wouldn't make it at this level or he was just flat out a bad kid because of some mistakes in college, that he should be crucified. I just don't buy it. So I'm about redemption. And a guy I would like to see redeem himself is Delman Young. Delman Young is one of two athletes in my career that I've ever gone on record and called them a jerk. And flat out, when Delman Young was a Tampa Bay Devil Ray, he was a jerk. He was an immature, young. I mean, we saw him throw a bat at an umpire, for crying out loud. And I saw the way he answered every single question ever asked of him in that clubhouse. I saw him talk down to female reporters. I overall just saw him act like an immature jerk. But since his departure from Tampa Bay, in his travels, I've heard from different people that he's a different young man. And I pay a lot of attention to Delman Young when I hear him speak. Because what I said about Delman Young when I was calling him a jerk is something that I will understand about guys that I don't think we will take a lot of time usually to do. LeBron James is another one. I've never met him. I have no evidence that he's a jerk. But the way he carries himself, the stories you hear, there's enough smoke there. The story that was on ESPN about his night in Vegas, walking around just acting like a schmuck. And I look at him and I go, well, it's real easy for me to just say LeBron James is a jerk. LeBron James is a schmuck. LeBron James is this or that. But I try to put myself for a second in his shoes. I try to imagine if by the end of my high school career, I was being talked about as one of the best basketball players in the world. I think it was Kevin McHale, I remember in LeBron's sophomore year of high school, said there are 2 or 3 players in the NBA that I would not trade for LeBron James today. So I try to imagine having that kind of celebrity, having that kind of fame before getting out of high school, and then coming to the NBA and being immediately dubbed the King and making millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I think anytime you hand a young man millions of dollars, it's not easy to handle, I'm sure. How many times do we hear about people hitting the lottery and their life goes to crap? It's not easy to handle. So when I hear about LeBron James acting like a jerk, and I think he's done that a lot. I still to this day think he acts like a jerk a lot. I say, I have no idea what it's like to be in that kid's shoes. And obviously he is more than likely a 99% chance the kid's a young, immature, egotistical jerk. However, when I think about who I was at his age, who a lot of people were at his age, and I didn't have millions of dollars. I didn't have fame. I didn't have those things that make being who you are that much easier, that makes being an immature jerk that much easier. So I look at LeBron and I say, I hope he grows up, and I hope he gets it. And I hope one day, while he's sitting down with somebody, he says, you know what, I was a pretty immature jerk. The decision, stupid. A lot of the things I did, stupid. And I get it now. And if he does that, I will root for LeBron James, because I'll understand that he's grown into a man. And that's what I'm hoping has happened for Delman Young. And I closely watched his face. I watched his mannerisms. I watched his body language last night as he was being interviewed after that game. And I don't know if it's hard to explain or understand if you've never spoken to the man face to face, but you know, even if a guy is faking it, you can see it in his eyes. I saw Delman Young answer a couple questions at Tropicana Field with a smile on his face, but you knew he didn't give a damn, and you knew inside the kid was still an immature jerk. But when I watched him last night, I didn't see that. And I hope the reports about him being vastly grown up from when he was here in Tampa Bay are true. And if they are, I'd be thrilled to see the young kid win a championship with Detroit. I really would. I'd be thrilled to learn that Delman Young has become a good young man. And again, being an immature jerk doesn't mean you're an awful person. Throwing a bat at an umpire doesn't mean you're an awful person. It means you got a lot to learn. Means you're an immature jerk. Doesn't mean that your heart is black, or that you have no soul, or that you're a terrible person. There are things I've seen in sports that do mean that. Hands down, there are things I've seen that do mean that. I don't think Delman Young's actions are those. I don't think they are. So, if Delman Young is the man I heard that he was in Minnesota, and most likely is now in Detroit if he was in Minnesota, good for him. Good for him. Because while it's easy for a lot of us to grow up and to stop being immature jerks, athletes aren't told very often. I never saw any of the reporters turn around and say, Delman, you're an immature jerk. I don't think many of his coaches did. I don't think many of his teammates did. And believe you me, if I'm an immature jerk, someone's going to tell me. And if you're an immature jerk, somebody's going to tell you. I don't think that many people took the time to tell Delman Young that. So if he's recognized that on his own, he's grown up on his own, good for him, man. And I hope he has. I hope Delman Young has grown and has learned how to be a respectful guy. And I think I saw that last night. I really, and I could be reading too much into a guy that just won a playoff series, and maybe he's in such a good mood that he's just not acting like who he really is. But, the next chance I have certainly to visit whatever visiting clubhouse he's in, if he's not a Detroit Tiger again in 2012, I'd love to sit down and talk to him and see where he's come. I'll tell you, halfway into my first year covering the Rays, I stopped talking to him. I stopped asking him questions. I'd stick a microphone in his face while other people asked him questions, but I sure as heck wasn't going to ask him anything and have him talk to me like that. But he seems like a changed kid, and I hope he is. I'll be right back. Go Detroit Tigers, I guess, now that the Rays are done, but We'll take a quick break, come right back here. It's your home for live streaming sports in Tampa Bay. It is TLSTV.com. This is the Pat Donovan Show.
Escapes the tackler, gets pushed out of bounds, but
Deep, and it's intercepted in the end zone by Robert Davis, and Nelson Aguilar will walk in again with another Berkeley Prep touchdown.
To open. And another ace in the same position.
escapes the tackler, gets pushed out of bounds, but
Deep, and it's intercepted in the end zone by Robert Davis, and Nelson Aguilar will walk in again with another Berkeley Prep touchdown.
To open, and another ace in the same position.
Welcome back. Couple minutes left in the show. Interesting story here on ESPN.com. I know that you are enjoying the 1-3 start for the Philadelphia Eagles as much as I am. And Frank Gore, I'll tell you what, NFL players are becoming more and more vocal. And Frank Gore said something I found pretty interesting about an NFC East opponent this past weekend in the Philadelphia Eagles. And also, I got a fantastic quote here from Chris Cooley, who had a good time on a radio show just this past week. And if you didn't hear about that, he was pretty critical, or not critical, but just stated his enjoyment of watching Tony Romo fail down the end against the Detroit Lions. But first, again, back to Frank Gore. He says, the Eagles didn't want to play at the end of the San Francisco 49er game, basically saying that the Eagles gave up towards the end of that battle on Sunday. He said the Eagles mailed it in. And here's the quote. I think playing that second half and the way we came out, the Eagles didn't want to play no more, Gore said on an ESPN interview on First Take. They didn't want to play anymore. I'll tell you what, looks like a pretty mentally weak team, and I'm really enjoying watching them unravel. I've been a big Nnamdi Asomugha guy. Asomugha is one of those guys, because of who he is off the field, you kind of can't help but root for him on the field. Now, I can't now that he went to Philadelphia. Had he gone to even the Jets, I'd have been at least a little rooting for the guy, but forget it now that he's in Philadelphia. But Nnamdi Asomugha's season has not really started too hot. Victor Cruz victimized him a couple weeks ago. And I just think if they struggled against Alex Smith and that San Francisco 49er offense, how are they going to fare against the Buffalo Bills this weekend? It's Ryan Fitzpatrick and Stevie Johnson and Fred Jackson. Teams have been ripping off some big runs against the Philadelphia Eagles, and Fred Jackson is off to a heck of a start. I'll tell you what, a 1-4 start, I would have never bought it. But I think it's likely now. I really do. I think it's likely. I think chances are the Buffalo Bills beat the Philadelphia Eagles this weekend. I think Philadelphia is probably going to score a whole bunch of points on Buffalo too, but I think Buffalo can outscore them. I think that Philadelphia defense is in disarray, and that Buffalo offense is playing as well as any in football. All right, I want to talk about Chris Cooley as well before we go. Again, you know that I absolutely despise the Washington Redskins and the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles, basically any of the NFC East teams. I have a real tough time rooting for them or any of their players. You just can't help but like Chris Cooley. Guy's just funny. And he went on a radio show this week and basically just said he thought it was hilarious. He thought it was hilarious watching Tony Romo implode and the Dallas Cowboys fall apart and lose to the Detroit Lions. And you almost never hear a guy come out that critical about another player unless it's like a head-to-head matchup. Those two will never be on the field at the same time. You rarely see guys say those kind of things. And he just said, hey, nobody's going to score enough points to come back in that game on offense. The only way the Dallas Cowboys lose that game is if Tony Romo throws those two interceptions returned for touchdowns on back-to-back series. It's the only way it happens. And Chris Cooley said it was absolutely hilarious watching Tony Romo fail. So, he, of course, as any player who makes some outlandish comments will be, was asked about those comments. And what's your first assumption? Whenever a guy makes a comment like this, comes out and says something that a lot of people would be like, whoa, you can't do that. You always assume when he's asked after the fact that he'll back off his comments. That he'll say, hey, you know, I think Tony's a great player. Good luck to the Cowboy, whatever. But you just expect, as I would, even with Chris Cooley, that player is going to come out and apologize or at least backtrack on his statements. So I'm watching the NFL Network. Again, God's gift to man. I'm watching the NFL Network this morning. And I see the comments. Somebody asked Chris Cooley about it. And here was his response. While I feel an honest respect for all NFL players, I show no remorse in cheering against another team, especially the Cowboys. If it sounded like I was delighted by Tony Romo's failure last week, I was. Oh, man. That's fantastic. I got to tell you, if the Redskins ever let him go, I hope he comes here because I'd love to be able to talk to the young. What a funny guy. If it sounded like I was delighted by Tony Romo's failure last week, I was. I really love open guys. I like guys like him, like Jad Ojocinco, guys that let you in a little bit. And I know sometimes you can't. And I don't really have a problem with the guys who don't, but I have some fun with the guys who do. And here's to Chris Cooley. I'll tell you what, here's to the men and women who serve our military. I love you guys so much, and thank you for what you do. If you're checking out the show, thank you so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow. This is the Pat Donovan Show, and this is your home for live streaming sports in Tampa Bay. It's TLSTV.com.
Escapes the tackler, gets pushed out of bounds, but
Deep, and it's intercepted in the end zone by Robert Davis, and Nelson Aguilar will walk in again with another Berkeley Prep touchdown.
To open. And another ace to the same position.